You know, Dr. Roger Leir is one of the world's most important leaders in physical evidence research involving the field of ufology. He and a surgical team have performed numerous surgeries on apparent alien abductees. I witnessed many years ago with producer Tom Danheiser a surgery with Dr. Roger Leir and his team. It was one of the most baffling things I've ever seen. We've played that tape numerous times on Coast to Coast AM. Roger's back with us. Tell me a little bit about what you've been doing over the past few years, Roger.
Well, we've done, as you mentioned, a number of surgeries for the removal of objects which apparently are alien implants. Alien for two reasons. Number one, they're alien to the human body because they don't belong there. And alien for a second reason is that they probably belong to a sophisticated civilization that's far, far advanced of our own. Now, we take these objects out. We essentially study them, look at them from the outside in. We look at the things that they can do, both chemically, physically, electronically, and then we compile this data and report to the public what we found. And we found some astounding things, which I'm going to talk about tonight. And these will be based only on the 15th and 16th surgeries which were recently performed. Now, we've got some scientists that are going to come on the show with us. One is a material scientist, and his field of expertise is nanotechnology. The other one is experimental nuclear physicist who has been on the program before. They're now both on the board of ANS Research, and I just can't wait to get to the end. But we've got to have a little background here first.
Roger, you're a doctor, and when you were going to school, surely you didn't go to school to try to dig for and uncover implants in people or alleged abductees. How did this all happen for you?
You're absolutely right, George. No, if someone had told me I'd been doing this 40 years ago, I would have said, you're halfway to the loony bin. No, I got interested in this subject, actually a long time ago when my father brought in the newspaper with a Roswell headline. But I've always had an interest in flying and astronomy. In fact, I wanted to be an astronomer, but my math grades were no good, so instead I went into a medical field and became a podiatric surgeon, and I've been in practice now for 46 years. Then something caught my interest, and it was at a MUFON meeting. You know, I knew absolutely nothing about the
Mutual UFO Network, to those who don't know what we're talking about.
Right. So here I was at a MUFON meeting, and it was a wonderful experience. Had a great speaker. So that got me started, and then I started writing for a periodical as an investigative reporter called The Vortex. And that led me to someone who showed me some x-rays, naturally, of a foot, and he touted that the objects in the x-ray were alien implants, and I turned around, laughed, and walked away. But the individual who was with me brought me back, and I said, these look like objects that were left over maybe from a previous surgery. So I said, why don't you just simply take them out and see what they are? And they said, well, I think the lady would like to have that done, but she has no money and no insurance. So I ascertained that she did not live in California, and I said, well, I'll tell you what, you bring her to California, and I'll do it all free, because I figured, well, it's worth a little bit of my time to have some fun.
Mm-hmm.
So let's have some fun and prove this is absolute poppycock. So we did 2 surgeries, and it went on from there. And with each one I've done, we've been able to get a little more scientific data. And, of course, we found out very strangely, George, that this takes money. So after I spent a great deal of my own, and my wife almost killed me, we were almost broke. We formed an organization called ANS Research, went through the paperwork to get a nonprofit status.
Good.
And we've gotten some some outside funds.
Roger, of the 15 or 16 cases that you've done, some of them, I'm sure, the objects ended up being natural, right? Or something left from a surgery, something like that?
Out of the 16 cases, we had 17 objects. One of the 17 objects was a very expensive piece of glass. The reason I say expensive was it wasn't expensive when the person stepped on it, but it was expensive to do the analysis.
To pull it out, yeah.
Well, to take it out and analyze it,
Yeah.
because it had properties of both glass and crystal. But it's only been one out of 17 objects that didn't have any scientific interest. Now, that's an unbelievable statistic. So part of that, I believe, is the effort that we make to investigate these cases before we ever do a surgery.
Give me your overall perspective on what you think these are and why they're in people.
Well, I think from what we've learned so far, and I'll go into certainly more detail later, but I think
Sure.
they're communication, electronic, and let's put it this way, extremely advanced electronic communication devices which are relating information to someone somewhere that probably put them in, and it has something to do with the function of the human body, probably down to the DNA.
Is the information about the specifics of the person that's carrying the implant, or is it about their environment? What are they sending back?
Well, we haven't deciphered the information. We haven't gotten there yet. That's going to be one of the, we found that a certain number of these objects are putting out radio waves. And in one of the cases, we find that this is a radio wave in the FM band, and I got a secure chart from the FCC through someone who I can't mention, but it turned out to be a deep space fixed or mobile communication frequency. Now, it brings the question to mind, why would an advanced civilization use a radio wave for anything? Like Uncle Stan Friedman says, silly effort to investigate. An advanced civilization is not going to be operating with radio waves. So that only lets me believe that perhaps somebody else is piggybacking or listening to this same information. But if you want to know why, it's safe for me to render an opinion, but that's all it is. It's an opinion. Sure. I think that the human race is being genetically manipulated. And this may not be the first time in man's history, because if you look at the historical record of man and the changes that have occurred, you might say that this has happened previously.
Interesting. Roger, what about government? What governments are aware of this? All of them?
I think that the knowledge and the information in relation to the subject and the abductions and implants and the whole ball of wax is now probably out of the hands of governments as we know them completely. I think it's in the hands of multinational private industry. And I think some people in government here, UK, Canada, other parts of the world have knowledge, but I think the knowledge is select and few. You say, well, above top secret, cosmic top secret, eyes only, whatever. Whatever the clearances these guys have are far beyond what the average intelligence clearances are.
Is there any benefit to us, these implants? Are we learning anything? Can we learn anything from these?
Well, I may be a cockeyed optimist, but I think that one of the salvations of the world is coming from without and not from within. I don't think this is something new. As I said, I think this has happened before. I think there's quite a history of things that have happened on this earth millions of years ago till now, and it's still happening. We're on the brink of something. Look what happened at almost the brink of World War III with Russia, with the Soviet Union. We had two incidents, one in the United States, particularly maybe two in the United States, and at least one we know of in Russia, where somebody else from somewhere else intervened at the missile silos and put a stop to it. And it was shortly after that when the Berlin Wall came down. So there is external influence on mankind, and I think that the objects that individuals have implanted in them are for the benefit of mankind. Like I say, I could be a cockeyed optimist, but I can't see any other reason.
Roger, with all this, David Jacobs, of course, noted researcher, UFO researcher, and one of the few, believes that we're being genetically altered for a planet takeover. Do you agree with that?
In part. I agree, only in part. I think, number one, there may be numerous advanced entities that are visiting this planet, and they may have different agendas. David Jacobs, I've discussed this with him before, and in relation to a hybrid program, I think there may be a group that is making hybrids. For what purpose, I'm not quite sure. Maybe it's in conjunction with another group that's genetically manipulating the human race. What if it didn't work?
Well, that's true. Dr. Roger Leir with us. I'm going to introduce Robert Kuntz. Robert Kuntz, of course, he's been on the program before, PhD, experimental nuclear physicist. He has 30 years plus of experience in physics and high technology. He's been a staff scientist at the Lawrence Berkeley Lab. He has served with U.S. intelligence, taught the electronics of remote intelligence gathering. Now to you, Roger Leir. Tell us of the involvement here of Bob Kuntz and set the stage for this story.
Well, we've gotten to the point in looking at these objects that have been removed where we're looking deep into the metals, the things that put them together. They're the basic elements, and we finally gotten down to maybe the atomic structure of how they're put together and the high strangeness that has occurred. So in doing this, Bob volunteered to take a look at some of this material and the evidence that we were producing from the laboratories, and became very interested in it, and very generously published an open letter in response to what he felt about these materials. I eventually became a board member for ANS Research, and in just recently now with the new things that we have found, Bob has stuck his neck out and laid out a theory which is just going to blow your minds. This is brand new information. This is the first time it's ever been done. Bob has looked at the time it takes for an isotope, which is an atomic small particle of an element, and how long this takes to decay, how long it takes to become perhaps another element, such as boron going to beryllium, two elements. And then he's put forth a theoretical formula in relation to the age of the universe. And he will explain that, of course, in detail. And we've gotten some idea. Now, Stan Friedman says, if you're going to go shopping for a loaf of bread and you live in New York, you're not going to go to New Jersey. So if we assume that the entities that are using this material come from the same areas where the material may be, and then we've got some surprising distances that we're going to hear about.
And tell us, who is scientist John Smith?
Scientist John Smith is, he's not. John Smith is a patient.
All right.
But the scientist Steve Colburn is going to look at John Smith's work and the work that we've done on the 16th surgery, which was Ron Noel. Some of these names are pseudonyms, as we don't usually like to use patients' names. But these are both very interesting cases with some similarities and surprising results. Steve is an eminent scientist and works in the field of material science with a specialty in nanotechnology. So he's going to come at this from a similar area, but looking at it a little bit differently.
Let's bring in Bob Coons back on Coast to Coast. How did you get involved in this?
Okay. In 2002, I was a conventional physicist involved in particle physics, high-energy physics, relativistic heavy ion physics, things like that. And I took a photograph of a dish-shaped object at noontime on a bright, sunny day. This is not a thing glowing in the night. And I got good pictures of it, and that started me into this whole area of interest in UFOs. And then I did an anti-gravity experiment, and went on and on and on, and now I've come up with a connection with Dr. Leir and his group. And let me tell you, George, they're doing good science. I've been at Lawrence Berkeley Labs, and I've been at Stanford, and I know what good science is. They're doing good science as best they can for a small group. And there's a report on my website that people who are interested in the subject should read. That's drkuntz.com, a report on implants. So I've investigated this very carefully, George. I didn't take anything for granted. I investigated everything. I interviewed implantees. I analyzed the report by Steve Colburn. I analyzed a separate report by Dr. Russell Vernon Clark, which was also analyzed by Steve Colburn. And my conclusion is that this is most probably extraterrestrial material being placed in human beings of import, and perhaps common citizens as well.
Say that one more time, Bob. I want everybody to hear what you just said. You're a PhD. You're a nuclear physicist. Tell us again. What did you just say?
It appears to me that there's an extraterrestrial civilization or entities who are placing in individuals objects, which we call implants, small pieces of iron, cobalt, nickel, with traces of iridium, so like meteoric iron, and they're placing it in individuals in this country and perhaps around the world as well. And so it's kind of astounding, but that's my conclusion. I think that other scientists, if they approach this honestly, they'd reach the same conclusion.
What do you think they're doing? Why are they doing this, Bob?
Well, I don't know exactly. It looks to me like this device, the one I analyzed from Steve Colburn's report, is I think it's a remote listening device. It's a strange material. It's iron with cobalt with nickel and traces of a large amount of iridium. Iridium is normally only found in meteorites. This looks like meteoric iron, but it's got a larger amount of iridium in it than normally we'd find in a meteorite. And it's also got a surface coating on it that's very strange, that appears to be sensitive to phonons, to sound. So it looks like the surface it looks like it's a device that's designed to intercept sound waves and retransmit them. Oh, that's another thing. These objects emit electromagnetic radiation. You can't. The ordinary piece of iron is not going to be emitting electromagnetic radiation, but these do, and they emit at certain frequencies, scalar frequencies that I'm quite familiar with. 93 megahertz, for example, 15 megahertz, and on down. So they're emitting electromagnetic radiation. They appear to be programmed to absorb sound waves. I think they retransmit, but listen to this. This is incredible. Excuse my voice is breaking. They self-organize.
You're that excited, Bob, huh?
Well, this is extraordinary, George. I've been doing science for 40 years, and I helped discover an important particle. I did some work on it, but anyhow, they appear to self-organize. You break these implants up, George. Listen to this. They reassemble. Now, if you break them today, I broke a big magnet. A magnet will not reassemble, but these devices reassemble. Self-reassembly. That's intelligent material. We're talking about intelligent programming intelligence into materials. self-reassembly. There are carbon nanotubes in these devices, and we don't find carbon nanotubes in nature.
Let's find out for a moment from Roger Leir. Roger, how big are the devices, and where are they generally found?
Well, the one consistent finding we have is that they are found usually superficially in the body, but yet near a bone. So there's a lot of places that you can think of, certainly arms, toes, fingers, jaw, a number of different places that meet that criteria. And I believe they are placed there for specific reasons. One of the reasons might just simply be if you're going to do these in mass and you want to get them done in a short period of time, this is an easy way to do it. Now, remember, they have no visible signs of entry. There's no portal of entry. Now, in one case, which was John Smith, he had a couple of blood spots that was on the toe where we found this. But after a day or so, those spots disappeared. And by the time he saw me, there was absolutely nothing there. This is a complex problem, and it's going to take a lot of time and effort to try and figure all these things out. But before Bob leaves us, I want him to talk about his formula for determining where these might come from in the universe.
All right. Let's do that.
Okay,
Bob.
let me just mention before I'll get to that in a second. Dr. Russell Vernon Clark is a PhD chemist who also reached the same conclusion I did. He's from the University of California. A number of years ago, he analyzed this Roswell artifact that Dr. Leir found, and the isotope ratios on that thing were off the wall. It's unbelievable, 20% isotope shift. Okay, now, as far as the time period, my conclusion is that the implant taken from John Smith was approximately, I came from an area of the universe that was in advance of ours by 90 million years. Now, that's a 2% isotope shift, and I assume that it's a electroweak decay that takes approximately a billion years half-life. So that's how I came up with this 90 million year figure. Now, that could be wrong. There could be other factors. I believe that the scalar electromagnetic radiation can shift isotopes. But I think we're that's an approximately good figure to use. But these isotope shifts, very, very unusual, extremely. And this self-organization, how in the world do they do that? I don't know. If you break anything up, it generally doesn't reassemble. I mean, when was the last time you broke a glass and the glass reorganized itself and came back together? That doesn't happen.
Doesn't happen. No, does not happen.
So I would say 90 million years. If I had to guess where this came from, you need if you have a time and you need a velocity to get a distance, and I don't really have a velocity, but let me just guess. I'm sort of, as an educated guess, I'd say maybe 50 light years would be the closest.
50. And where would that put us, Roger?
I was just going to have Bob tell us where would that put us, let's say, in the Milky Way galaxy.
Well, the nearest star is Alpha Centauri. That's about 4.3 light years away. So 50 light years would be
10 times that. Plus.
10 times that, or something like 10 times that. So that's an approximate. Now, 90 million years, as far as light years go, the galaxy is approximately 100,000 light years across. The nearest galaxy, I think, is about 10,000 light years away. There's a nearby galaxy, galactic distances are 100,000 light years approximately. So I would say it's coming from this galaxy, and the closest would be, I would say, somewhere within 50 light years.
And they've obviously developed a different propulsion system, Bob, right?
Oh, absolutely. John Hutchinson, by the way, John Hutchinson sold his laboratory to a company, laboratory in Germany. It's the United States is we didn't do anything. We didn't follow it up. Now the Germans are developing anti-gravity in their laboratory using John Hutchinson's equipment. And also the Russians offered, two Russian scientists who did a very important anti-gravity and free energy experiment, offered it to the Department of Energy, and the Department of Energy turned it down. This is crazy. But anyhow, yes, anti-gravity and also hyperspace, transport, and the laws of physics. We don't have the right laws of physics, George. We don't. You know, Ed Leeds-Scallion had all kinds of ideas that have been
Coral
verified.
Castle.
Yeah.
Coral Castle.
Yeah, we think we know so much. We need to really learn what the laws of physics are.
Why implant human beings, Bob? I mean, they must be doing. If they're doing it here, they got to be doing it throughout. I
would say it's
galaxy.
a remote intelligence gathering, but maybe that comes from my background. That's my guess. They're gathering intelligence on our civilization. Possibly they don't want us out in space with our nuclear weapons and barbarity. I don't know. So I would say they're gathering intelligence.
Maybe I can add something to that. I did a study on 17 functional growth characteristics in children over a 40-year period, and I found that they've been advanced from 16 to 86%. Now that, by any way you look at it, is not evolution, not even short evolution. The human race is changing. The kids that are born within the last 50 to 75 years are not the same human as myself or my friends. There's something different about them. If you listen to what children say and really listen, they're getting knowledge, but they're not getting it necessarily out of a book from a teacher or television or their parents. They have this particular knowledge that seems to be, maybe part of the universe. So things are changing in human beings, and that's why I came to the conclusion that perhaps one group, maybe not all of them, is regenetically engineering human beings so that we stop the god-awful stuff that we're doing to each other and this planet. But in order to find out how this genetic experiment works, you've got to have some kind of remote information gathering, just as Bob said. And I think that this all dovetails to that particular reason.
Bob, as you look at this, I want you to give us your overview of what the heck is going on.
Well, I'm positive, 100% positive, we're being visited by extraterrestrials, and that some of them are putting implants in people.
Up next, joining us will be chemist Steve Colburn. He's a chemist material scientist with 20 years of industrial experience, and he's currently working in the area of carbon nanotubes. Steve has recently done analysis on several apparent alien implants that Dr. Leir has removed from his patients and has uncovered startling findings as well. Now, Roger, tell me of Dr. Colburn's involvement, Steve's involvement.
Well, Steve became involved around the time of the 14th surgery, and they became very interested in the work. And when the 15th surgery was done, he had the ability to perform some of the very expensive analysis that we needed done. It was just a coincidence, and this is the way things happen, even in science, that his field of expertise was in nanotechnology. And most people will maybe remember the story about carbon nanotubes. It was only about maybe 10 years ago where science was arguing whether carbon nanotubes could even exist, more or less exist in nature. And then finally they were constructed. And the carbon nanotube is very simply described as a structure of carbon in which the atoms are lined up in a particular form so that it adds tremendous strength. And there's been talk about, you probably heard it, about building a space elevator where you could launch a vehicle, but the tower would be so tall you wouldn't have to defeat the force of gravity, so which would be cost-saving advice for a conventional ship going to somewhere else in the solar system. The other thing they could be used for, Japan was interested in making clothing out of them, weaving them into fiber and cloth, and a woman could change the color of her dress or keep the individual warm in the winter and cool in the summer. So they have tremendous applications. They're the strongest known thing known to man. And Steve just happened to be in that particular area of expertise. And when he looked with his equipment, this was the first time, at some of the implants that we had already done, he found these carbon nanostructures, plus many other different things, which we're going to hear about.
Steve, tell me about your relationship here with Roger and what you uncovered and what your theories and conclusions might be.
I've gone over several of Roger's objects that he's removed previously, like you said, plus I've analyzed extensively the last two objects from surgeries number 15 and 16, and we found some very startling things. We found nerve cells connected to the devices, as Roger's found in the past, and we found that the objects have a coating on them similar to a biological hard part like shell or bone, and that might be partly responsible for the lack of an immune response that we see to these objects in the body. These objects produce no immune response whatsoever, and that's extremely unusual.
So you mean the body, normally when an object's in there like a sliver or something, the body attacks it, tries to get rid of it, right?
Exactly.
Okay. And in this case, it's not. It just kind of like welcomes it.
No, and it does not try to get rid of the object at all.
At all, yeah.
These apparently are devices that are designed to not produce any sort of an immune response. And,
are you picking up, Steve, from these objects any kind of signals or any kind of field or anything like that?
Oh, absolutely. Like Roger said, we picked up radio signals from the devices, both the John Smith object from surgery number 15 and the Ron Noel object from surgery number 16 were giving off radio signals before removal. They were giving off different radio signals. Two of them from the John Smith implant turned out to be satellite and aeronautical communication frequencies. And both these objects also had strong magnetic fields of over 10 milligauss.
How were the objects detected?
How many objects have we detected?
Well, how do you find them?
You can pick them up on X-ray, or with a stud finder also works, a small metal detector, and a Gauss meter can also pick them up because they almost always have magnetic fields.
Do the objects look organic, or are they all artificial? What the heck are they?
Well, they seem to be a combination of both. The main bodies of the devices are metallic. They're mostly composed of iron, at least in all the objects that I've analyzed so far. The John Smith object was definitely meteoric iron. The trace element pattern matched exactly that of a class of nickel iron meteorites called hexahedrites. But the material was apparently not from our solar system because, like Bob pointed out, the isotopic ratios were quite skewed compared to what is found on Earth or in our solar neighborhood.
Could we duplicate this implant today, Steve, if we gave it to a scientist?
I would have to say no to that. I think that even the Black Project military community could not duplicate it or would have major problems even attempting to duplicate something like this. They are sophisticated nanotechnological devices with carbon nanotube electronics built right in, and they have a sophisticated organic coating, which is similar to a biological hard part, and do not produce any immune response to the body. And apparently nerve cells grow into the devices after they're implanted, and that's something that's beyond our technology as well.
Explain, if you would, for Steve, the carbon nanotubes, what exactly they are.
Well, carbon nanotubes are very tiny cylinders of carbon. They're similar to graphite. If you took a plane of graphite, a two-dimensional sheet of carbon atoms that's arranged in a hexagonal pattern like chicken wire, and you rolled it up into a tube, you'd have a carbon nanotube. There's various types of carbon nanotubes: single wall, double wall, multi-wall. You have nested tubes and double wall and multi-wall, and these seem to be the single wall variety.
Are we using nanotubes now in any kind of application?
Yes, we are. The research is mostly in its infancy, but we've been trying to make ultra-strong metal matrix composites using carbon nanotubes. They're the world's strongest known material, plus they have very unique electronic and conductive properties.
How advanced would these nanotubes be that have been discovered in these folks compared to what we've got on this planet today?
Extremely advanced. These seem to be finished devices that are at least 100 years ahead of anything we can do at this point. That's being conservative.
Roger, when you looked at these objects, and you've been doing this for years, are you seeing a change, a technological change with these objects?
Well, I would have to say no. I think the one thing that has changed is our abilities as we gain more knowledge and the sophistication of the equipment for which we were able to use to look at the objects. Now, why would anyone want to look at the carbon nanotubes 10 years ago when they said they couldn't exist? And did we have anything? Did we have electron microscopes that would give us the necessary information, 10, 20 years ago? So as the devices advance, as our knowledge advances, you begin to look at things that you never looked at before. Now, there are other things in these devices that Steve hasn't mentioned yet. I want him to address the issue. We find that there are crystalline structures, and I think this is something for him to explain.
There were structures in the John Smith device in particular, such as orthorhombic crystals of sodium chloride. Sodium chloride usually has cubic crystals. These were elongated cubic crystals.
What's the significance of that, Steve?
Well, we're not sure, but they definitely were too regular to have been formed there when the blood serum evaporated, and they appear to have been part of the device. We hypothesized that they were there to generate certain scalar radio frequencies, similar to the old crystal radio sets.
Huh. How do you think these devices are put in a person?
Well, abductee reports indicate that the aliens have a device that has a long tube on it and a needle and a fiber optic going down the center, and the device has a handle with a trigger, and the needle is inserted into the area of the body that they want to put the implant in, and a button is pushed, and the implant is then inserted through the needle and into the body, and they're activated by ultraviolet light, according to many abductee reports.
Roger, when producer Tom Danheiser and I witnessed your surgical procedure to remove an implant out of the physical face cheek of a person, that thing moved. Every time the surgeon tried to grab it with his tweezers, the object moved. You finally got it out. But is that unusual, the movement of these things when you try to get it?
Now I would have to say no, because even in the 15th and 16th cases that we did, if you were looking at the X-ray scanning device, which we call a C-arm, and a metallic instrument is put into the wound, the object that you're trying to isolate or clamp moves, and surgical instruments are surgical steel, and they're not supposed to be interacting with any kind of a magnetic field. If so, it could be extremely dangerous in the case of, major surgery. So when you take a relatively inert stainless steel instrument and you insert it into a wound and it gets close to the object and the object moves out of the way, something other than what's usual is going on.
Steve, is it possible these objects are man-made?
I would have to say that it's maybe possible, but extremely unlikely because of the fact the objects have very skewed isotopic ratios, and the material does not seem to come from our solar system, plus the fact that it's highly doubtful that anybody on this planet has the technology to make such things. So it's a remote possibility, but I would say no.
Based on what you've analyzed, what do you think they are?
I think they're extremely sophisticated nanotechnological electronic devices that, like Bob said, are probably for the gathering and transmission of information. I think that they probably transmit sensory information, cite what the subject is seeing and hearing, and probably physiological information, the sounds in the room. They may be microphones.
And in terms of advanced years ahead of us, you said 100, maybe more?
Yeah, I think 100 is a conservative estimate, maybe several hundred.
And that estimate is based on you guessing when we would have that technology, I assume, right?
Correct.
So, it could be thousands of years ahead of us.
Yeah, it could be. It's very difficult to make these kind of technological predictions.
Probably a good time to interject a little sentence here that's in Dr. Kuntz's report, in which he said then the object could have come from a stellar system which began to evolve approximately 100 million years in advance of our solar system.
That's all possible.
Yes, I think it's possible.
And if you look at the things that Michio Kaku has talked about with his classification of civilizations, this falls right in line with a very advanced civilization.
It sure did. Steve, when you did your analysis After you were done, were you in shock?
Yeah, pretty much. I pretty much came to the same conclusion that Dr. Kuntz did, that my first thought seeing the isotopic analysis was that these objects must have come from someplace closer to the galactic core where heavier isotopes are built up because of higher mass supernovas. And I don't know how many astronomers are in the audience, but in any case, it did seem like from the data that the material came from someplace else in the galaxy.
Roger, how long have these implants been in the individual? Since they were kids or adults? What do you think?
Well, we had one known case which we could answer that very clearly, and that was 46 years. Now, in the last case, a very interesting case as far as an abduction scenario is concerned, there were 3 young boys, 9 to 10 years of age, and lived in Tennessee on a camping trip. And they all had conscious memories of something happening one night. And under hypnosis, the surgical subject related a pretty good scenario, which was certainly typical of the abduction phenomena. But what I found interesting also, in the time between, he's I think about 46 years of age now, so 10, that was about 36 years. So, but interestingly enough, to hear under hypnosis, to hear him talking about the light from the craft overhead coming down, how they began to float. I'm an old buck, and if I was a kid, I would have a different attitude. Now, if someone or something lifted me off the ground, I'd be worrying about falling and breaking something. But to hear him explain this, as a 9 or 10-year-old boy, they were thrilled. Oh boy, I'm having fun. We're having a ball. We're floating up off the ground. See, no fear whatsoever. So,
Roger, well, based on what you see, based on what you've heard, based on what you've looked at, if you were putting implants in another civilization from another planet, why would you be doing it?
Well, the one thing, as I said, that's a very difficult question to answer, but you have to look a bit in totality at the whole UFO subject. Number one, I don't think that's much of a stretch now. What we know from governments and military sources and all the rest of the stuff, that there are visitors visiting here from somewhere else with advanced technology. I mean, that's a given. I have no question.
Yeah, the evidence is overwhelming.
Yeah, and if you accept that, then you got to go to the next step. There may be certainly remote-controlled vehicles, but again, from all the witnesses all over the world, this is not a U.S. phenomenon; it's a world phenomenon. The drivers of these things have been seen, and they've been seen in different forms and different garbs and guises and so on. So you have to have folks that are manipulating these vehicles, and in order to get there from here, the old story about they can't get here because of the distances of linear space.
People are thinking about it in our current propulsion systems. Of course not, but that's not how they're using their way to get here.
Of course not. And as Bob alluded to, that science is in a box, and we've got to think out of the box. So if they're coming here and they're doing abductions, they've got to be doing it for some reason. But then again, as I say, when you look at the possible effect of abductions, and you look at families and so on, I've been in 42 countries in 7 years. I've discussed this with parents and grandparents from literally all over the world. And if they talk about the kids, I'm talking about measurable, quantitative things that growing children do. What age do they raise their head, stand up, simple age of speech, complex speech, all been accelerated, 16 to 86%.
Have any of these abductees, those with implants, gone through any kind of regressive hypnosis, Roger?
Yes, they have. We didn't do it with certainly all 16 cases. In the beginning, I was a little bit reticent in using regressive hypnosis at all because we just didn't want the criticism of somebody saying, "Oh, you're planting ideas in these people's heads." But when we got farther into it, I thought that if the subject chose to undergo regressive hypnosis, we would at least supply them with an individual that had experience in the alien abduction phenomena, and we've been using Yvonne Smith.
What do you think is going on with this hybrid engineering?
Well, as David Jacobs has pointed out, it looks like there's a certain amount of them that are doing genetic engineering, where they are doing some type of DNA splicing, perhaps with their own. But, our dear departed friend Zacharias said that Enki was the guy. He came, he was an Anunnaki, and he is the one that's responsible for originally genetically engineering Homo sapien. So, as I said, perhaps they've come back, and maybe the group that's doing the hybridization experiments is a secondary backup, because if the original plan, let's say, it doesn't work and we begin to annihilate each other and a piece of the planet, I don't think they want that to happen. Number one, they want to try and stop it, but if the planet has to be repopulated, then perhaps they need a different kind of organism. And you were looking for ideas for implants. I don't know if we know if it's even really kosher to talk about logic, human logic, based on an advanced civilization. But, let's look at a bear. A bear comes into your cave, George, has been breeded with another bear, and we want to know its sleeping habits. What do?
Yeah, that's true. We monitor, we watch, we genetically alter, we do everything.
And we look at the results remotely because they're implanted. Look at the complaints of John Glenn going into space and said he had to swallow implants.
Yeah, absolutely. Look what we do with pigeons. We put, homing devices on them and things like that.
Sure, and we do it with sea animals. We, look at the porpoises that have been used to detect mines and report back, positions, and look at the ships under the water. All remote devices, some of them far more advanced than certainly we know about.
Roger, when you take these implants out of people, and God knows how many there must be throughout this planet, what do you think happens to the person? I mean, do you think, if you took, for example, let's say some detective had a homing device on a car or something like that, and it was taken off, he'd get upset. Do you think that's what's happening with these aliens who are implanting these people? You take the device out, do they come back and put it back in, or what?
Going by human logic, that should be the case, but that's not the case because, and again, I get asked this question very frequently, how come you? How come I do it and nobody else is doing it? I researched the literature in depth before I ever even started doing this as a joke. But there was all sorts of stories that about surgeons and taking these objects out, strange objects, and they disappeared, turned to powder, dust, or they would be positive on an X-ray, and the surgeon would go to take it out, and there'd be nothing there. So, I don't like to say this, but it's the only conclusion I can come to is for whatever the reason, I'm supposed to take them out, I guess. I don't know.
It's your mission.
Maybe that's my mission, exactly.
Hey, Roger, and let me ask you, this is just an estimate, but worldwide, how many people out there do you think have implants?
Well, based on the Roper poll, which was about 2% of the American population, you multiply that worldwide, you get a pretty large figure of abductees. And if you look at the number of, right now, I'm looking at the computer, I'm 1,782 emails behind. That's today. So are these continuing? Are abductions continuing? The answer is yes. Yes. It's a worldwide phenomenon that's going on, large numbers of people involved. And it looks to me perhaps a figure of maybe only 15% of the abductee population might have a genuine object in their body.